Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel The Grey Matters, where we talk about human behavior. Today we are going to talk about something that we are all are very common with, and we have done some point of time in our life. So stay tuned and watch till the end to know better about yourself and the people around you. In my school days, there have been many times where the results are out. I have done badly in few of the subjects. When my parents would have asked, "Why have you done so badly in these subjects?" I would have said instantly, there were out of syllabus questions, the lecture was not good, the teacher was absent, and many more kind of excuses. And I would have comfortably dodged the part where I would have to mention that I have done very badly in my preparation. But at the same time, if there would have been few of my friends who have done very good in that subject or in that exam, I would have told, okay, they have gone lucky this time. They have got some good suggestion questions, something like that. All of us, we know we have done this kind of thing in our life, and we do in subconsciously in our day-to-day life. But today in this video, we are going to talk about in terms of human psychology, what is this thing called, and how do. So the instance that I talked about just now is basically called as attribution. And in terms of human psychology, this is something that can be defined as the inferences that generally people draw about their own behaviors and about the behaviors of others. And this is something that is used by psychologists as a concept that can help them to understand what people are thinking about the world around them and about their own behaviors. We are going to talk about it in much deeper. But before we go into the topic, let's see what are the areas that we are going to cover today. First of all, we are going to talk about attribution, the different types of attribution. Then we are going to discuss something called as covariation principle. And lastly, we are going to close the video with something called as correspondent inference. Now that we know what attribution is, let's talk about the types of attribution that we have. There are mainly two types of attribution that is there. Of which one is called as the internal or dispositional attribution, and the second one is called as the external attribution. Now the first one, that is something where a person infer that whatever has happened, the cause of that event is basically due to some personal factors, which can be ability or the feeling or the emotion of some person, of that particular person. Whereas the external one, second one, is basically something where people infer that whatever has happened because of some situational factor. If we try to talk about an example for this, let's think about one of our friend who has got a car broken down in the middle of the road. Now, if that person infers or kind of attributes that that incident has happened because of their own negligence, because they have been late with the servicing of the car or something like that. Now that is something which we will call as internal attribution or dispositional attribution. But on the other hand, if there is an inference that is drawn that the car is old or the status of the roads in India are very bad for which the car has broken down, that is basically an external attribution. So this is majorly the difference between the two, where in one people attribute the incident that is happening with their own abilities or with their own traits, and in the other one where people basically talks about the situational factor as the main reason for the event to happen. So now let's talk about something interesting, something that will definitely help you to understand how and why the people around you are behaving something weird. It can be your girlfriend, your best friend, or your boss. So this is something which is called as covariation model, which is a very popular attribution theory. Here we try to understand with multiple observation and try to get to the root cause of the behavior, and we try to understand what is the attribution that is being done by that person, whether it's something which is caused due to the internal personal attribution or internal attribution, or it's something as an external attribution. And in doing so, it takes care of both the social and the self-perception that that particular individual holds. Now, basically, this model has three main pillars to it. First one is called as consensus, which basically talks about in general how a particular behavior is, to what extent that behavior is performed generally by people in similar kind of situation. Followed by there is something called as distinctiveness, which talks about nothing but the uniqueness of the behavior in a particular given situation. And finally we talk about consistency. So it talks about how consistently that a particular behavior is for that person, or how consistently, or how if every time that particular person shows the similar kind of behavior. And just now we will use these three things with an example, try to understand how we can kind of decipher how people behave and why do they behave. So now that we have talked about the example, let's start or talk about an example from my life. So I have gone out, say, with few of my friends to a fine dining restaurant, and suddenly one of my friend started complaining about the food, that the food is very bad, this is the worst food that I have eaten, something like that. Now let's try to understand the behavior of this friend of mine under the scope of covariation model. So what we will do, first of all, we will try to question the under the pillar of consensus. So what is the question that we will ask? The question will be, is it something that only that particular friend of mine is doing or complaining, or is it something common down the table? Okay. Secondly, what we will do is we will think about the consistency pillar of the model. So what we would ask that, is it something that he does every time that he goes out and eat in a restaurant, or we have some kind of food and drinks outside, or this is something that he is doing only now. And lastly, we will talk about the distinctiveness of part of the model, where we will ask, is it something that he is doing only in this particular restaurant, or only for a particular kind of dish, or is it something that he is doing for all the restaurants, or in all situations, in similar kind of situation. So that will give us again a yes no answer, or a low or high distinctiveness to our answer, right? So let's think about, there can be two scenarios, right? One, we found that okay, yes, every one of us are telling that no, the food is really bad, the consensus is very high. Next we see that the consistency is low, that is, no, it is not something that he does every time that he goes out. And again, there is something like the distinctiveness is also very high, that is, we say that okay, it is only about this particular restaurant or particular dish that he is talking about. So in that case, it might be that it is the problem in the dish or the restaurant, for which, as it's a genuine problem with the restaurant, for which he is kind of offended, or he is kind of worried about, and that is a kind of external attribution. Now say just the reverse thing happened, where the consensus is low, like it is only that he is the one who is thinking the food is bad. The consistency is very high, that every time he goes out with us, he is kind of complaining that no, this is bad, this food is bad. And in terms of distinctiveness, that is also low, that it is not for a particular restaurant or for a particular dish that he is doing this, but he does this for all of it. So in that case, it is basically difficult to kind of please that particular friend of mine. So it's an internal attribution. So I think I've tried to make it clear, or let me know if it's kind of hard for you to understand. I would try to make it even better on that part. But this is something that how we can use the covariation model to understand the root cause or the actual behavior of the person around us. So in the last part of today's video, we are going to talk about something called as correspondent inference theory. This is nothing but another attribution model, where our human brain basically tries to connect whatever intentional activity has been done with some kind of similar characteristics that we know in our day-to-day life. I will try to simplify it with an example. Let's say just before your marriage, you are asking your would-be wife where she would prefer to go for a honeymoon, whether it be a seaside Goa or it would be the mountainous Kashmir. Now let's say she tells that she wants to go to Goa. Generally, since you don't know that person at that point of time very well, you would infer that she loves beaches more than the mountains and the summer more than the cold nature. So that's how our brain tries to correlate the actions that has been taken, and they try to connect it with some kind of attribution or the cause of attribution, and that is what we call correspondent inference theory. I hope this makes sense to you, and that is all that we had for today's video. Hope you liked it. If you like, please click on the like button. At the same time, if you want to know anything specific on human psychology, please do mention in the comment section, and also do subscribe the page and the channel. Thank you.